So today we're going to be talking about the hows and why of whip transitions. Now what a whip transition is a segment at the beginning or end of your video clip that is very fast, but that puts motion blur into your video. Now there's a couple different types of whip transitions. There's the more vloggy whip transitions, like I've been doing in this video, but then there's also the ones that we use in B-roll segments to spice up our edit. Now, as far as post-production goes, they're pretty much identical. One thing that's really fun about skateboarding is when you have someone to go around and skateboard with. I found that out when I was skateboarding with my friend Cody in my last video. And so, my sister said she'd like to go skateboarding. And since now my thoughts are totally frazzled and I'm having trouble thinking after shooting the B-roll, I think I'm gonna skate around with my sister for a few minutes and then go home and pick this up back in the studio. But before we start talking about the how to do whip transitions, I want to talk to you a little bit about the why we do transitions, and specifically whip transitions. Now, transition is something between two clips that ties them together. Most of the time, this should just be a cut. Just a simple cut. In fact, pretty much every one of the B-roll segments that I have seen that I've been really impressed with have, for the majority of the time, just used straight cuts in tune with music. And it didn't have any of the fancy transitions that we've come to know in YouTube B-roll segments. And really, there's a few reasons that I use whip transitions. Some that are positive and some are negative, and I don't think you should use whip transitions for those reasons. For the positive reasons, for one, they just look cool. I mean, I actually really like the look of whip transitions when they're used properly. I think it can really add something to your film. And that's sort of the other positive, is that when you learn how to use them, when you learn how to go in and out of them in a way that adds to your story, they can really spice up an edit. But the negatives is that because they look so cool, you can take something that really was, by all accounts, a poor B-roll segment. Some of the segments that I have done, that when I look back, I am almost ashamed of how bad my framing, my subject, my everything was. And it had whip transitions on it, and so people commented and said, wow, this looks great. Whereas I'm sitting here saying, that was lazy. That wasn't a good B-roll segment, it just had some cool spins in it. And so that's something that I think people need to understand, is that really a whip transition is not going to really help bad footage. And you should put your thought into each B-roll segment, not just put in whip transitions or any transitions to mask bad filmmaking. But enough about my faults when it comes to whip transitions. Let's talk about actually how to do these. Now, what a whip transition is when at the beginning and end of each shot, you put in a very fast movement, both into and then out of the shot, which causes motion blur. And then in post, we can go in and put those two clips together and make it more look like a seamless shot. And when you do whip transitions really well, it almost looks like one consecutive shot. And that is what you want to be trying to do when you're doing whip transitions. Now, when you're doing B-roll segments, what you have to be thinking about is how your camera is going into and out of a shot. If you don't know the direction the camera is coming into or out of on your timeline, then you're going to have to, on the field, shoot pretty much every direction, coming in from each angle, each side, up and down, in order to make sure you have coverage enough to get those B-roll segments in line to make it look like a smooth shot. The other way to do it is to actually shoot linearly, to actually shoot in succession the shots. That way you know what you're coming into and what you're going out of And so for the next shot, you can come into it in the same direction that you came out of the last shot. If you switch back, it's not going to feel smooth. It has to feel smooth, or else the whip transition is useless. It doesn't actually help tell your story. It doesn't help your film. It will take away and sort of give the audience a mental whiplash where they're basically trying to have to figure out what happened instead of following your story more concisely. Now, first of all, when I'm doing whip transitions, usually I'm shooting them at 60 frames per second. That way I can slow it down to 40%, get a little bit of slow motion, and also be able to speed ramp in and out if I need to. Start at the middle and I'll whip out of it. And then I will start my next segment from the same directions, swing into it, hold or do a movement, and then swing out of it. I will actually physically take the camera, move it faster in, slow down, move it fast out. And I just continue to do that, trying to switch up my directions while still making it look smooth. Now, after we have our B-roll segment filmed, then we want to take it into post-production. Start with your first clip, then you want to go to the end of your first clip and find where your motion blur starts and go a few frames into that. You could go very far into that, or you could not go very far at all into that. That's going to be up to your discretion and how you want to do it. Sometimes I'll make a whip transition really long, and sometimes I'll only make it like maybe 10 frames, not very long at all. And then you cut it off where you want your one clip to end, and then you go to your next clip. Then you find in the beginning of that clip where the whip transition starts, and then you want to come in a few frames from that. Move it over, and what I usually do is I overlay 1 or 2 frames, never more. And then I just continue to go through to the end of that clip and the beginning of the next, and so on and so forth until my B-roll segment is complete. And that's basically it for whip transition. Now, doing it for a talking head segment is pretty much the same thing. It's actually a really simple technique verbally, but it's actually a very difficult technique to get right. And I have had a lot of trouble. In fact, I've had to record entire talking segments because I put the whip transition at the end of it, but I started turning the camera too soon, and therefore I couldn't really use that whip transition because I lost audio, I lost visuals. So you want to practice with this, and don't go out and use this on a commercial project before you really have mastered it, because if you do this badly, it looks really bad. Now, the last note that I want to make is that when you're swinging into and out of stuff, make sure that they're relatively the same exposure. If you swing out of your last clip into a shadow, but then swing into the next one from the sky, that's not going to work out. You need to have things of relatively the same texture, color, and exposure in order to make a whip transition work. So that's it for this video. If you found it helpful, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and I'll see you all in the next video.